This series is sponsored by the Old School Football Shop.
Old School Football is a UK-based retro football company honouring the rich history of football past by creating high-quality embroidered vintage team crests on t-shirts, polos, hoodies and scarves. Minimalist badges from the 1800s right up to the 1990s.
On the website oldschoolfootball.co.uk, you can find English League and non-league, Scottish football, international teams and even rugby. And what's more, until the end of the lockdown podcast, listeners can get 10% off their whole catalogue plus free UK delivery. Just use the code HONEST10 at checkout for 10% off.
You can follow them on Twitter at OSF Shop, Instagram at Old School Football Shop, TikTok at Old School Football, Facebook at Old School Football Shop, and don't forget, just use HONEST10 at the checkout for 10% off.
Hello and welcome to Coaching Diaries, a new series from the Honest Football Podcast. I'm Charlie Betts and I'm a part-time football coach and a PE teacher. As a teacher, I've always been fascinated by the way coaching works in different sports and the impact that that can have on me as a football coach. Over the next few weeks, we're going to meet different expert coaches from different parts of the sporting world. We're really going to drill down into their philosophies, values and techniques of their field and find out what makes them so great at their discipline and how it can improve both you and me as coaches and as people. If you like what you hear, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe and comment below on anything that you've drawn from this series that you might want to share with others. This series kicks off with easily the most experienced and qualified coach we're going to interview, and it's Rugby League expert Stuart Wilkinson. Stuart is a former pro, having played in both England and Australia for many years. Once he hung up his boots, Stuart became a world-renowned coach and has since gone on to coach England, Wales, France, Great Britain, Leeds Rhinos when they became world champions, Wigan Warriors, and is currently the head coach of the Serbian national team. Stuart is on his way to completing his PhD in talent development and is currently a university lecturer in coaching and performance. Anything that Stuart doesn't know about coaching probably isn't worth knowing. Stuart takes us on a journey that has since made me flip my whole coaching philosophy on its head. You can find Stuart on Twitter at Alpha Rugby Coach, and as always, you can find us on Twitter at Honest Football Free. All it leaves me to do now is introduce Coaching Diaries with Stuart Wilkinson. And I'm delighted to say that Stuart Wilkinson is with us now. So, Stuart, thanks very much for coming on to the onto the show. I appreciate that, especially at the minute. It's obviously quite everything's up in the air. So, thank you very much for giving up your time.
Oh, you're welcome, Charlie. It's nice to talk to the coach.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're going to do, Stuart, obviously your background is in rugby league. I know you're actually involved in teaching at university now, which we'll talk a little bit about later on. But just tell us about your background in rugby league. Obviously, you actually started out as a player and played in various different places. So sort of how did you get into that from when you were a child, maybe, or a bit later on? So your sort of background in rugby league in general.
Yeah, so yeah, obviously I'm northern, and I was brought up in a small northern town, so I had no choice. Rugby league was around all the time.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't take much interest in it up to being about year 11 at school. My dad was a professional soccer player. I have some cousins with that. I was, and that's what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
So I was moving towards that. I love sport. I played everything I possibly could do at school. I love PE, all the normal things. The little town I lived in, it was only a small town and a small school in Cumbria. And, the community of boys there played soccer together, played cricket together, did athletics together, played, all different everything that was out there we did together. So, there was some advantages in and around all that. I knew rugby was there, and the PE teacher always sort of encouraged me to give it a go. But I wasn't bothered. I was, perhaps I wasn't even good at football. I was very, very quick. And then eventually, about year 11, and in those days we used to have inter-house competitions. So there'd be 4 houses within the school, and they'd play every sport. And the rugby team was short. I think they only had 10 players, and I got roped into playing. And I'd be about 15, 16 by then.
Right.
And obviously I really enjoyed it. And I remember the PE teacher was a rugby player anyway, and he was always pestering me to play rugby. And he said to me after that, "What do you think?" And I said, "I absolutely loved it."
Oh, really?
Yeah. he said, I just thought it was brilliant. And again, it's a running sport. And I was very quick. I probably wasn't any good. I just run around everybody. But I wasn't stupid enough to not to realise there's loads of other things that goes into making any athlete of any sport. But back in them days, I never knew that rugby players were made in the kitchen and in the gym. That type of thing. And he said, well, do you want to come down to the club? And I went along for a training session, and then I was hooked. I never played another sport again after that, until I retired. And I went back to soccer when I retired for a bit, just to play like that from football initially before I got into coaching. But yeah, I mean, like the research says, Charlie, I was late into the sport. And that helped me when I started to develop talent. Straight away I knew to look at other sports. So when I started to coach, I knew the other things because of my own experiences, both with soccer and athletics and judo. There were so many things that transferable skills that helped me as a rugby player. And very quickly, just innately. I mean, I'm going back to the 70s now, so I don't even, you were just looked after by experienced ex-players. I don't even think there was coaching qualifications in them days.
Right.
But I mean, my first few games, it just stuck me on the wing because I was quick.
Yeah.
And then they noticed I could kick really far from being from my soccer days. So they moved me to fullback, which was quite a technical, strategic position.
Yeah.
And then they noticed I could beat people. So then I moved positions again very quickly into some of the key positions in the halves, and my transfer was made into a strategy type player in rugby league from just being a fast winger in soccer. Contact was never a problem for my background in judo, so I knew I could take big people down and I could catch small people and fast people. So it was a perfect storm for me, really, Charlie. And by the time I was 18, very, very quickly in the sport, I was signing my first professional contract. And that was a huge shock. 2 or 3 years earlier, I was still just kicking around playing football, and now I was about to play professional rugby.
Yeah, that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, and then the next minute I was out there. I remember playing against Widnes, who at the time were the best team in the country. And I was there lining up opposite Tony Marler, who was the Great Britain standoff as an 18-year-old. It was a rude awakening. It's the toughest thing I'd ever done. It was terrifying at times.
Yeah.
The huge crowds from just being a country bumpkin. And I was soon found out that everybody was as quick as me, if not quicker. People could kick the ball better. And there was a lot of gaps. But the coaches persevered with me, and I did too. And I had to change the way I played and what I did, and off I went. My professional career had started. I got obviously in them days, there's lots of New Zealanders and Australians. And appear within you, and they populate your teams. And they always used to say to me, "Oh, you need to get to Australia, Stuart. You absolutely kick on a trim over there. The fast pitches, the hard ground.
Right.
You'd love it." When I got to 20, I got an opportunity to go over and sign a contract in Australia, which was the best competition in the world.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Which I did. I was only going to go out for a summer season and then come back to finish off my contract. I had a job, I had a girlfriend and everything else.
Right.
Well, I went out there, Charlie, and I struggled again. It was tough again. I wasn't getting regular first team games. And in the end, the coach said to me, "We've got a loan move." I said, "Where to?" And he said, to Wests. And so they're bottom of the league. They haven't won all year. But I knew I had to go because I was going to get a regular game.
Yeah.
Then I transferred to Wests in my first summer season, if you like. The first few months I was there. And I was playing, and week in, week out, I was playing the best player against the best players in the world. Every week, which is what I wanted.
Yeah, of course.
And I remember the week leading up to flying home, I thought, I haven't done anything yet. And they were saying, "We've got your job for the summer, don't go back, stay here. We need you to stay, you love it here." And I did. I made new friends and everything else. So Charlie, I stayed for 10 years.
Well, I I was going to ask you about that before you sort of carried on with that. In terms of going into a new dressing room, so obviously, you know, you said that when you moved over to sort of Australia, what's that first day like? Because I've never played professional sport. I was, you know, it's just been in around sort of coaching environments, and you know yourself, it's different being the other side of the fence almost. But as a player, going into like that new environment, especially I suppose you being obviously from a different country and probably a different culture, you know, in that sense. What's it like? Are people quite friendly to you, or I suppose maybe because the team was bottom of the league, they had a slightly different mindset. But is there people who play in the same position as you who maybe then are a bit more standoffish, or do you know what I mean? Like the dynamics, how does that sort of work really when you first go in?
It's exactly how you'd imagine. First up meeting, wonderful. You can actually see like really, really good people, and then the banter starts.
Right.
And I was a young person, and I had no problem in being made a fool of, and I've no ego like that. Mate, I got hammered.
Oh, right.
And you do, it's part of it. Again,
yeah.
It's building, and there was some cruel things done to me, and there were some embarrassing moments and different things like that. Both when I moved to rugby, when I transferred from soccer to rugby at grassroots level, and then quickly to professional level, you know, it's cruel and unforgiving as a sport. Don't get me wrong, but so are the people that populate it, and that's part of it. But you know, there's things that I don't like that goes on, and I was always smart enough to avoid some of the ridiculous cultural things that people like to do to you, particularly back then. And when I coach today, there's more positive ways to develop character and team cohesion than doing obscene things to each other.
Yeah, I suppose in those days. I'm sorry.
It really was soft fun, and I was a brunt of a lot of jokes, but I had no problem with that. I was very, very young, and you know, and groups of people used to join in making a fool of me and things like that. But I've no problem with that. And,
no,
it didn't me at all, and didn't you know waver any of my ambition on what I wanted to do in the sport really. So yeah, daunted. There's some interesting things as well. I mean, you know, you got to, you know, for some of your listeners and what have you, you've got to, you know, back in the 70s when I was leaving school, you know, there's no gyms there. There was no Total Fitness and DW.
No.
You know, there was odd leisure centres, but they just maybe had swimming booths. There was no. The only gyms they were iron gyms, you know, the Arnie stuff and things like that.
Yeah. And
they turned out to be quite good for us in them days, because I remember them at my local one. And my friends inspired me. I remember them turning up with good physiques for pre-season. What have you been doing? And they went, well, we'll go to Elmsworth, and why don't you? And I thought, yeah, I'm going to go there. And it was only like, something like about £2.50 a month. I remember going in to see him, and he just said, what are you rugby playing? And I went, yeah. And I mean, they're full of big, massive bodybuilders, but that's all there was. And I knew I had to fortify my body to play the sport. You know, because in rugby, your body is the weapon, really.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So, you know, so I knew I needed to be able to do that. And it was just excellent, really. So I said, well, you know, compound lifts, chins and dips, do your own conditioning, £2.50 a month, come every night of the week, and I'll do your program. Charlie, nothing's changed. It's still that today.
Yeah, I was about to say it's.
And there were smart people. Don't get me wrong. You know that it is a sport that's renowned for cheats and things. But I got what I wanted out of it. So you know, that's all there was in the UK. But the big thing that hit me when I landed there, and I remember pulling up at the training ground and saying, "Where's all the lads at? And what's all that noise?" And he goes, "Oh, they're in the gym." And I thought, what a gym next to a field. What a great idea. And I thought, I walked in there and it was like a really good performance centre. And I'm talking about 1979 now, Charlie.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even look anything like that in the UK. Then to go there and seeing these guys working at themselves, physically preparing themselves, psychologically preparing themselves, eating the right things, had a profound effect on me as a young player. So it sort of went like that. So straight away I knew this is the sunshine, the training facilities, and everything that the country was about. I wanted to bleed it for every bit of knowledge I could probably get as a young player.
Yeah, I was going to sort of say, really, when you then eventually returned to the UK, do you feel like, not in a, I can't think of the best way of wording this, not that you've been to the promised land and then sort of come back, but did you sort of come back to the UK thinking, why are athletes maybe still training in the ways that, I suppose because you were there for 10 years, maybe the UK had caught up by that point. But do you know what I mean?
The landscape in the UK had changed. There's no doubt about it. And then there was other things started to appear. I mean, like back in the 70s when I started, I loved to work in sport. The only degree there was a PE degree.
Right.
I didn't have science, so I was never going to do that. By the time I came back to the UK, things started to appear like sports science degrees and sports degrees. They were starting to appear. There was good facilities to be able to train. Local community grants were being, and so facilities were changing even at grassroots levels. Most clubs had access to strength training equipment and stuff like that. In terms of like up-to-date practices, that still wasn't nowhere near. I was a distinctive advantage of coming to the back end of my career and starting to coach that I'd had some, broader experiences on how to develop rugby players.
Well, I was going to say, sort of leading on to that, really, that transition from playing to coaching, I suppose, going from, like you say, Australia and, maybe they were at the forefront of the training developments and that, coming back to the UK, do you feel like you had an edge and that, therefore that maybe set you apart from other people who maybe were in a similar position, you like say, coming towards the end of their career and thinking about coaching in England rather than sort of in Australia, if that makes sense? Did you feel like you're a step ahead of people because of that?
Yeah, there's two interesting stories here, Charlie. It's why the route I took into coaching and capitalising on what I knew. So the first part, obviously, what I knew. So when I was getting contracts in the UK, I was coming to the back end of my career. It was, Stu, can you look after that for us? Stu, can you do this for us? Stu, can you do that for us? And I started, and I was, I was a captain by then, and so I could look after a bunch of young players doing a particular skill or an activity or advise them. So besides doing things that we normally do when you become a senior player in and around the changing rooms, it's probably no different to what happens in any form of football. You get to the back end of the career, Charlie, you start to take on more responsibilities. Exactly the same rugby. And there's an expectation that you do that. Yes, obviously, like there's some people that play that are shy and disengaged and they don't get into it at all, and they're very good players, or they can't get it across. But yeah, coaches capitalised on me being there, and doing that as well, a willingness to do that. People also looked at you as well when in the future as years come. With coaching positions, I suppose just to go on a tangent, I need to make a statement here to all your listeners. The major currency in coaching is your network. The stronger your network, the greater your currency, the more your opportunities. So I didn't do that intentionally, build up my network. It's happened over a period of time. So, today, as a 60-year-old coach who's still learning, I'm coaching the Serbian national team.
Right.
All being well, we'll have the European nations at the end of the year. How did that happen? I didn't apply for it. It appeared in the network. All right. Yeah. So any young coaches who are talking about you need to be in the right place at the right time. Yes, you do. Put yourself in that place. So build your net like this, not like me and you now, Charlie. We're both part of the network, and possibly we might help each other at a certain time in the future. So I never say no to young people that need help. I'll allow them into my network. Yes, you get some bellends, don't get me wrong.
No, of course. Yeah, there's plenty of them, isn't there? But yeah.
That's what we're doing, aren't we? But, them that actually, take time to want to speak to you, it's worth it. Okay. Just keep that one in your back of your pocket. And if you want to do anything with that in the future, we can do. Back to coaching, the transition to coaching. So that was taking place. I was getting more and more responsibilities dropped on me on a regular basis when I was finishing off my career. Right, how I got into the route I decided to take, and I'm really proud to say that I did. I could have gone straight into like a reserve grade coaching, assistant coaching with my network, but I chose to go back to grassroots sports and work as a volunteer with under 12s.
Right.
So if your listeners can have in mind, in that from being an under 12 coach, I went through to coach professionally.
Yeah.
Rhinos at Wigan Warriors. I worked for the governing body. I coached England schoolboys. I took England Academy on tour to New Zealand and Australia and beat them both in their own backyard. I've coached England. I've coached Wales in the European nations. I've coached France in the World Cup. I've coached Russia in the World Cup. And now I'm coaching Serbia. And I started as a volunteer under 12 coach.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll talk you through the journey, Charlie.
Yeah, go on. No, I was going to say, I've got about 3 or 4 questions on it, but it's probably easier if you do it.
Students, and in that time as well, I've done a sports science degree, I've done a teaching degree, I've done a master's in sports coaching, and now I'm doing a PhD. All right, in talent development. Okay, so I can walk the walk and I can talk the talk.
Yeah, no, I certainly can.
And just remember, it's literally like the pauper and the prince. All right, I left the house naked to do under 12, basically, with nothing. Okay. Yeah. But there's a reason for that motivated me to do it that way. A kid who I knew, who I grew up with in the next village to me, really, really good player. And we got together again at the back end of our careers, and he was really good. And sitting down like this, Charlie, having a cup of coffee with him, I always think, God, he'd make a great coach. Yeah. And we're both playing in the same team. And the team we were playing for was doing really well. It was going for promotion to the first division. And like anything else, we hit a bad spell. And I remember we went to a club that hadn't won all season in Yorkshire and lost. We had an Australian coach at the time, and he was under real pressure. And over a period of weeks, there was arguments and stuff, and they'd lost the changing rooms, like they were. And there was effing and jeffing and carrying on. So what happens, we've all experienced it.
Yeah.
You just got to work on making sure that never happens to you, which we can talk about in the future. But in that time, I remember I was well thought of at the club, and the bus stop was there, and on the bus on the way back to the northwest, we could, we knew there'd be trouble. We're talking about we couldn't see him last much longer. And when I got back quite late, and because I went for a drink with my friend, and I remember coming in the door, and my missus opened the door for me at the front door, and she said, "Oh, the chairman's on the phone for you." And it was like about 11:45 at night on a Sunday night, and I thought, "Oh, tell him I've just gone straight to bed." Rang about 12 times, and I know it was after Charlie, wanting to know what had gone on.
Right.
I wasn't going to. So I went to bed, but then I got up in the morning and the phone was ringing, and I thought, "Stuff this, I'll go to work." And I was working as a fitness teacher, finishing up playing, and I just took some qualifications, and that was the first the gig I had, the first job I had after when I was starting to finish playing. And so I ignored it, and I jumped in my car, got to work, and the receptionist saying, "Oh, the chairman's on the phone for you." I'm like, "Bloody hell. Tell him I've gone straight into it. I've had to take a class. I'm still not doing it."
Right.
I kept avoiding him all the time. Anyway, I rushed to get the early evening paper from the paper shop. This is pre-internet, this mate.
Yeah.
And that's that's how old I am. Anyway, I opened the paper and I looked, and the lad I'm talking about had got the job.
Right.
And I was chucked bits for him, and I'd avoided all the shit as well. So I was really happy for him that he got the job. And on the Tuesday, I remember going down, and it was like his first session and stuff. He goes, "Oh, Stu, I need you, help me." I goes, "Yeah, no problem. I need to play as well, and I need to do other stuff." And off he went on his coaching career. Charlie was terrible.
Oh no!
Honestly, I know. And over a few weeks, the young blokes come to me and said, "Honestly, Stu, you're his mate. You've got to go and tell him it's terrible. This someone's going to deck him in a minute." And he was worse, and he just couldn't get across what he knew, Charlie. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to do this. And I remember getting him, and we went into the referee's changing room. Can I talk to you? And he said, "Yeah, of course you can." And we had a conversation, and it was really, really difficult. And I said to him, "What we need to do this properly, and I'll do it with you. Let's go and get a level 1 badge. Let's go and get a level 2 badge. Whatever we can do. Let's get qualified so we can understand the process to get this across." Because you know so much, and it's doing this to you. And we were stuck in there for about 2.5 hours, Charlie. It took us and in the end, he got it.
Yeah.
It was great. "Will you help me?" and all the rest of it. And he goes, "Yeah, of course I will, but we need to do it properly to make it work. We can't do that because we're just killing everybody." And I tried to do it like that. Anyway, I get up, I'm walking through the door that night and the phone's ringing. And my missus says, "Oh, the chairman's on the phone for you." And I thought, hopefully it could be good news about giving me some pay to coach.
Right.
And I knew him really well, a lovely man. And he's recently died, God rest his soul. And he said, "Stuart, we're sacking you." And I'm like,
"What?"
You're joking. He goes, "No." He's been on the phone. He said, "You're a shit stirrer." He said, you get, and all the rest of it. And I'm like, "You know me, I wouldn't do that." And he was like, "I'm sorry, but it's that man. We've given him the job. We've got to back him." I said, "How long have I known you?" "I've known you 25 years.
Yeah.
"No, mate, you're done. We need you out. And we've got to back him." And I thought, right, that's done it for me. But that was the point where I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it really well.
Yeah.
Where can I go to make a mess of stuff that I don't hurt anybody? And I just went back. I walked into the local little town where I lived, into their club, and said, "Listen, have you got a team that needs coaching?" And they knew who I was from being like a local rugby celebrity, if you like.
Yeah, of course. No, definitely.
And they said, "Well, the under 12s need a coach. There's your bucket, there's your sponge, there's your ball."
Right. Off you go.
I didn't have a clue, Charlie, honestly. I didn't know about kids, didn't have any myself or anything. So off I went. And I made such a mess and did some great things and some terrible things with them. But in the end, I knew I needed help. All right. So, yeah, I knew parents were important. I knew, and they helped me. In fact, they organised me for the first few weeks. They were just thinking, "Great, Stuart Wilkinson's coaching our kids." Brilliant. I couldn't help but get loads of support off them, but which helped me develop in future years a performance parent programme. So that they were like my humble beginnings when I knew, to develop young people was a biopsychosocial model that you had to work through. That I stumbled across while just in my playing career and my first adventures into coaching with kids. Charlie, it went really well, and the club backed me loads. They were like, "Oh, we've got a gem here," and I couldn't do enough for him, and I was still finishing off play. So they got me my badges, and things were going well, and I was coaching under 16s and under 14s and doing all sorts for them and building up a good reputation at grassroots level as a coach. Well, of course, and I was volunteering for this. I remember the chairman, Joe, coming up to me and said, "Listen, have you seen these things? We get these emails and these letters through about the national pathway, what kids go on to coach. I think you should go and apply for one of the coaching positions on it." I said, "Well, I'm not a level 3. And he said, "Oh, well, we'll pay for your level 3. And the local league had tipped him some money and said, listen, it's 500 quid this level 3. I said, "I can't afford that." So they'd paid for me to go on this level 3. Wow. This is fantastic. People who do that for me. But I was putting shift in for kids.
Yeah, of course. No, absolutely. Yeah.
And so I applied for the job, and I got a head coaching position at the National Training Centre at Amplethorpe. And it was like 2 weeks off work. And I said to my missus, "Can I have, the kids were tiny then, but can I take me 2 weeks holiday from work to do this?" And she said, "Yeah, of course, because we're not going on holiday anywhere. The kids are too little." So I ended up working on the National Under 15 and Under 16 pathway at Amplethorpe. And these were voluntary positions, Charlie.
Yeah.
So the network grew again. I started to connect with people that I played against and had been on coaching courses and stuff like that. And they gave me like a head coaching position on there, and it went really well, Charlie. And at the time, when I was working on that, and we'll get back to the network in a minute, the England Academy coach, God rest his soul, was Mike Gregory, or the Great Britain Academy coach was Mike Gregory. And he was preparing for a tour for New Zealand and Australia in 2 years' time. So he'd come to the camp to see what was coming through, which makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And he had different chats with me, and he's saying to me, "What's this like?" I'm like, "What he's like. I like what you're doing. How well prepared you are. Everybody's got a role to do. You're looking after your assistant coaches. It looks like you're really enjoying your coaching." And yeah, I was. Now go back to Australia. When I was living in Brisbane, the club gave me an apartment, and when different people came in from away, they'd drop them on me to stay to live with for a few weeks till they could get on their feet, and I'll find them somewhere to be.
Yeah.
A couple of kids come over at the time, Andy Platt and Neil Holden, who both later went on to be Great Britain internationals,
Mm-hmm.
St Helens and Wigan. And Andy in particular, we became really good friends with. Okay. And he was actually captain of Wigan when they were a great team and legendary, really. And winding it forward a bit, he actually gave me my first professional coaching position when he started to coach in the UK. So we were friends. But the head of England Academy and him were close teammates as well, our former teammates. And then the next day, Mike came back to watch me coach, and he said, "Oh, can I? Do you want to come for a cup of tea at dinner time?" So I went and had a brew with him, and just as simple as this, he just said to me, "How do you fancy being me?" I spoke to a friend of yours last night, Andy Platt, and he speaks really well about you. I said, "Oh yeah. He lived with me for a bit, Andy," and he went, "Well, I'd like to offer you the England Academy assistant coach if you fancy it." And I'm like, "Wow, yeah, I'll do it."
Yeah.
So again, networking through voluntary positions. And then straight away I was working on the national programme for preparing an England Academy team to go to New Zealand and Australia.
So if you don't mind me just jumping in there really, really quickly, Stuart, in terms of that life choice then, I suppose, I don't know, I'm not asking for financial breakdowns, not in a rude way like that, but I assume obviously going from a voluntary role to a paid position, that would impinge then on your sort of, your day-to-day job before that.
Yeah, because I was a self-employed fitness trainer, I could adjust stuff, you see. So,
Right.
Yeah,
I was going to say, how did that sort of work for you, really, in that sense?
Your circumstances were adaptable.
Right. Oh, okay. Because if you don't mind me asking, I know it's a hypothetical question, but just for argument's sake, you had a 9-to-5 job in an office. I know that you didn't, but do you think you still would have made that leap across, if it meant sacrificing some, that, I know it's a different job role, but do you see what I'm sort of getting at? Were you still that sort of motivated to do it, really?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day with things like that, Charlie, it depends on who you work for.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I suppose actually, yeah.
And the Great Britain on the national pathways was only a part-time job.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I need another source of income as well. So,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
The head positions were a full-time salary, but anything else wasn't, which I had no problem with.
No.
Yeah, if you could work for an organisation that would second you and allow you some time to be able to go and do something that's pretty important, and then there's the benefit: is it going to be any use to them?
Yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah.
What can you bring back? What other skills you're developing when you're out there doing that for them? So, I think you're right. I mean, I know that, again, Charlie, it was a perfect storm, wasn't it? In a position I could control my own, adapt my own employment to suit this opportunity. Yeah,
if I'm just going to sort of ask a question. I was going to do it later on, but I think now's a sort of perfect time. When you've then, so you're at this point now where you've obviously been offered a part-time sort of role in that national pathway. What were your values going into that as a coach? Because obviously your previous experience had been playing and then working your way through, but what was your sort of main principles as a coach in terms of, I don't mean like in individual sessions, but just what was your sort of value and how did your philosophy, sorry, that's what I'm looking for. And I suppose, has it changed? I assume it would have done, obviously, through the experiences you've since had, but how much has it changed since then, if that makes sense?
I can articulate it better now. Now I know what it is. But back then, the actual tenets of my philosophy were the same. I was a service provider. That's all I was. And how well I can do that depends on how well I develop myself. It's all about lighting up the grass for them players, giving them a great experience. And today it's evolved into developing self-determined independent thinkers. And of course, loads to that. There's many tenets in that, but that's my philosophical statement. And I didn't know what it was then, but that's what I was living. Now I know what it is. It's to develop self-determined independent thinkers, and personally remain committed to lifelong learning. I'm 60 now, and I've learned, in the last, doing a PhD, I think to myself, God, I've learned loads. Watching the 30 odd years, and I'm still learning. This is great. And the PhD has provided me an opportunity to be able to do that, Charlie. And sometimes I think, fuck, how did I miss that?
Yeah, I was just going to sort of ask you if I know it's different, maybe different sports, but maybe sport in general in the sort of generational sort of thing. And the reason I say that is when I was at like high school. I was at a couple of academies for football, but then got released at 16 and sort of never went back into the program from there. But I remember the sort of coaching, and particularly in more local football, that I was sort of receiving then was a lot more dictatorship, like you were saying about the autonomy almost. What didn't feel like there was as much of that. And, you know, almost it felt like from watching it from the outside, even in adult sort of sport, it was a lot more of coaches barking orders and a lot more motivational sort of things. Whereas now it feels like coaching is like a lot more like what you're saying, that sort of self-led learning and the self-development as well. Do you think that part of that, you know, what you were saying, what you've learned is because sort of sport has caught up with that as well, if that makes sense? Or do you feel like that was through your own sort of mindset really that you've learned all of that?
Yeah, I think there was, you know, like you know, like I've always had a thirst, you know, like going back to when my PE teacher at school, you know, I remember being 11 and looking at the timetable and seeing, bloody hell, the javelin, we're going to throw the javelin on Thursday. How exciting is that? We're going to throw them around. I was only about 11 or 12.
Yeah.
And then getting down there really early, and Bill come walking out, and I couldn't see any javelins. He had a big sack in his hand. And he come over to us all. He emptied these bag of tennis balls on the floor. And I said, "Where's the javelins at, Bill?" And he went, "You need to learn to throw first."
Yeah.
You get me?
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely.
I mean? So you know, there's always been smart blokes kicking around. Don't get me wrong, but I think, you know, the way, I think it's coach education that's evolved.
Right.
Thankfully. And to be fair, your sport's probably one of the last ones to do it. In recent years, it's really, really took off, football.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You know, when I used to listen to and go to watch what was happening on the UEFA licenses, you have to stand in a particular position on the field. You have to do things at a certain time. Now there's a lot more, you know, there's a lot more a different approach, if you like, to the game, being the teacher and your involvement and how you support and facilitate what emerges from that game. Do you know what I mean? Well, I think it was coach education that made us say you need to do A before you do B, and you get C. Go back to A and do A better and get B. You get C right, you get D. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I completely get that.
Coach education that's developed, and you know, and trusting, you know, the huge body of research and evidence that's being churned out in sport now, about coaching and how coaches develop and how they develop. It's really, really kicked on in the last few years. It's absolutely brilliant to see. But yeah, I've always been a person that was, you know, don't get me wrong, you know, I suppose even today, you know, I like the interaction with other human beings when I'm learning. You know what I mean? So the people that you meet on your formal education courses, and the people you meet like this, Charlie, through informal ways of developing yourself. That's the part that's always buzzed me. Listening to me, having your beliefs and your views challenged, and being able to listen to somebody else's and compare them to your own, and question and scrutinise why they're doing things, and taking bits from it, from the wisdom of the Jedis that are teaching us, and things like that. And if they're not there, going and finding them.
I think you've raised a really good point there, Stuart, because I feel like for me sometimes, and I, obviously in the grand scheme of things, I'm very inexperienced as a coach, and even in terms of my teaching sort of background, but I do think sometimes and I probably speak on behalf of other coaches who are sort of maybe early on in their journey, it can be, you can make it about yourself a bit too much almost, and maybe I don't know, my personal feeling sometimes can feel a bit egotistical, my sort of coaching, and really it's really challenged me. I have to sort of address that. But I think it, like you were just saying, it's that, I think being, maybe as a bloke as well, that being open enough to say, right, I don't know everything, and I'm willing to learn, and almost making yourself a bit vulnerable by having those conversations and networking a bit. Because I suppose you are putting yourself out there a little bit, aren't you, to admit to not knowing everything, and maybe as a egotistical man, sometimes it can be quite difficult to do that. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but
yeah, I think, you know, like it's you know, if you have some success, you know, like a professional level, it's quite difficult in clubland, I think, because you know, particularly if you're successful at a successful club and are winning stuff, you've got your blueprint, haven't you?
Yeah.
And while they might think, oh, we've altered how we how we do things and how we're delivering some of the aspects of our technical and tactical stuff, even then they haven't really altered anything what they're doing. But I think it's the shift away from that when you're able to step away from that, or you hit a catastrophe, you lose your job, and you get an opportunity to redevelop yourself and rethink, and you step out of those environments when you really learn. So we sort of, every sport's influenced by its the hierarchy, and whoever's top of your food chain. Everybody goes on about Klopp at the moment. Last year it was the guy at City won it.
Yeah, Guardiola. Yeah.
You know, and they get excited about the DNA of Barcelona and things like that. So
yeah,
you know, that's how cynical we need to be able to be. But I think if you can self-regulate and you are really good at self-reflection, and you think to yourself, but I didn't really like myself being like that. And like what you've just talked about there, Charlie, where you think, God, I've come across a bit, you know, I've indoctrinated these into this idea I've come up with, and it doesn't work unless you get under the fabric of your athletes and you get to know how they think, and you're really happy with their and comfortable with their input, and you're confident that you know your onions, and you can design stuff from what emerges from their perceptions of how things should be. I think it's your duty bound. Then you're always locked in this professional development. You're always looking for answers, aren't you? But the minute you start to say, this is how we do it, and this is the framework, and let's scaffold it, and this is what training looks like, because this is the route we're heading to make us successful. I think, you know, you're going to have a job for a bit, and you're going to be successful, but you're not really going to crow that much as a coach.
No.
You can pull yourself out of it like you've done there, and think to yourself, right, even the behaviours I didn't like then, even how I delivered that, I'm not convinced that really, really helped them.
Because I don't know about. Oh, sorry, Stuart. Sorry.
The more skillful you become, reflecting and recycling the key parts from your reflection, turning them into action plans, and then going back and then tweaking what you've just done.
Yeah, because I don't know. I know you've probably coached hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of sessions. Sorry, but sometimes like in the car on the way home, I almost feel that sort of self-reflective sort of cycle that you're talking about. Sometimes actually, at the time, what felt like a fairly pants session, whether it be through my delivery or I don't know, it could be, you know, a resources issue, whatever it is. Actually, when you then go to a game situation, maybe 3, 4, 5 days later, sometimes you can see the benefit of that more so than maybe this slick sort of session that whizzed through and everything went right. And actually, I think it can be quite easy sometimes, I find, to jump on and just think, right, that was good, that was bad, and maybe not try and wait to see the fruits of that, if that makes sense.
You're absolutely right, Charlie. When I've been around collecting data on my PhD, and I've gone back, you know, like a lot of my former players that I coached when they were kids, and now starting to coach. So right. I've got accessible, convenient places to go to watch, to collect my data for the PhD. And Charlie, I see a lot of shiny sessions, you know what I mean? And when they say to me, what do you think? I'm like, well, it didn't represent how messy the game is. It didn't fluctuate. It wasn't smooth and uneven. It wasn't clear. There wasn't stress. You know, they literally looked slick as they went through the session. So and I would think that the transfer on that's going to be minimal. But having the confidence to be able to go through that ugly phase. And that's, you know, in professional sport, that's really difficult because, you know, even the players get stressed if it's messy, you know, and it can even, you know, they're quite fragile. It might knock them off and make them feel a bit of confidence for actually when they go into the game. When if you develop them like that, being able to, you know, be comfortable in that chaos, and that's my philosophy when I'm developing coaches at university, which I'll talk about in a minute, that everybody's got to be happy in the chaos. They've got to be comfortable, you know, I say comfortable, but it's chaotic and messy. And sometimes it doesn't, you know, the game gets that physical. It doesn't even resemble the sport.
No.
What are you doing in training to make it look like that? So if you use a games-based approach, you're going to go through a lot of ugly, messy periods. All right. It's not going to be slick and clean like it does when you drill something to death. Don't get me wrong, that works too. But the transfer from games and from messy stuff and from ugly stuff is actually more realistic than anything else I've found over time. And I don't want to get too scientific on this conversation, but
no, feel free to.
Well, that's right into everything that you talk about repetition without repetition, and about go through those ugly phases, mate. They work. They do. So like that. It's a good sign. All right. And I say to the players all the time when I'm coaching them, how did you find that? I can see you're pissed off, and I can see you're messy, and I can see you just, good. That's a good sign. It's a sign that you care. It's a sign that you care. All right. And it's a sign that you're not there yet. All right. And we need to revisit. You know what I mean? So I always make sure that I bring it into context for them, so they can see it's part of their journey as young players.
Yeah.
And how do they get out of those messy, uncompromising situations? Well, they're not going to get out of it unless you coach it.
Yeah, I was about to say, Stuart, because that was one of the questions I was going to ask you later, but you've gone straight into it, was that for me personally, one of the things I found difficult is when, because I was sort of coaching a youth scenario and now coaching adults, is particularly if adults can be quite vocal, as you probably know yourself, if they react negatively to stuff in your session. And I almost saw that as a bit of a challenge sometimes. And as a young coach, I suppose that's maybe a natural thing to feel at first and feel threatened almost. But I think you just spoke about that brilliantly, about maybe how to reframe that negativity towards whatever it is, whether it's an aspect of the session or your delivery of it or what, I don't know. But if that makes sense. So some of your experiences maybe.
I would say, guys, come talk to me. No apologise for it being difficult for you, this. No apologies for it being messy and uncompromising. No apologies for you having to work a little bit harder than what you normally do to chisel the way out of what's going on. Now go away, have a think, all right? Give you 2 minutes, come back to me and talk to me about what better you can do, all right, to make sure this works. And I just keep those, if you like, those perceptions of what happened alive, that it's part of it, all right? And I'm not going to trim it off to make it comfortable for you, all right? Deal with this now, and what do you know to be able to deal with this? Now, if they come back and they haven't got anything, that's when I start to scaffold stuff.
Right.
Okay. But no apologies for things being difficult, because that's what it looks like.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Because
I can't start to move defenders and cut the defenders down in front of you to give you some space. Find it. All right. And how do you find it? What's the method of finding and manipulating space? All right. So this becomes a little bit more comfortable for you. Think about that process. Come back to me. Right. Okay. Let's do that then. And it's just that two-way conversation all the time, where yes, sometimes I might only pull them in once, and I went, I'm really, really good that you're all stressed and uncomfortable. All right. It's telling me, all right, that we're actually creating what's causing us problems over a weekend. All right. You go again, keep going. Let's see you overcome it. Sometimes I don't even do that, because sometimes you might just be coaching attitude. Do you know what I mean? And get your finger out and get it done. Okay. And sometimes you can pull them out of that and give them some sexy things and sexy, ways to get out of stuff, and then it becomes too smooth for them again. And you get them off I just think if they're under the cosh, unlucky, deal with it. That's the sport.
I really appreciate you. Aside from the fact that we're doing this as like a podcast to go out to people, I think I've grown so much just in this short conversation with you. So stuff like that is just, it's gold dust, really. I suppose it's just reframing it, isn't it? Like you say, the way you sort of do it. So I think
you've got to get. I wouldn't speak to young people like that. But I wouldn't.
No, of course, no.
But when I'm working with adults,
that
know it all, right? Deal with it.
All
right. What's your strategy to cope with that? Some of the smart asses always say to you, "Oh, Stuart, if you did this, and you hang on a minute, I'm not playing. You are. What are you going to do? All right, how are you going to outmaneuver him from there? It's not going to work with your little box of tricks you're trying at the moment. You need to try something else." And Charlie, I even set them up to fail.
Oh, really?
Yeah, of course I do. Do you know what I mean? Because if they're doing something, all right, and it's not working, they've played a long time, they think, no, marker needs to look like this. I'll set it up till they fail at that in training. And they're right, okay, here's my method. Here's my suggestions. All right, get some space how you get out the tackle, create some space. Make sure that you're defending the threat and not the perceived threat. Okay, how do we do that? And you just go back into those tiny little things. So I don't think there's a problem with making sure that you're planning that it's going to be messy and ugly. All right, when you need to decode stuff and change things, I would deliberately do that, particularly with senior smart players. Right? And let everybody know they've failed.
Yeah, no, I think that's
Now try this. I would
yeah.
do that. With young players, it's more about discovery and
Mm.
problem solving and them trying stuff. But that's the part where you can't afford to lose the game logic or the skill
Yes.
logic. You know what I mean? Where it becomes that abstract, it loses representation, or they become too creative and start to do silly things. You've just got to make sure that you're aware that could happen in your back pocket with young people,
Mm.
and you can't go too far. That they start to jump around trying to do some crazy things that loses all logic of what the sport or that strategy or that part of the game you're trying to develop.
Mm.
So you just got to be confident you can work across those different domains with the same values that, it's ugly and messy, and you're going to learn how to deal with that.
Yeah, I think that's such a what's the word? A mind shift of mindset that I think, like you're saying, actually, I think in football we're probably the last ones to catch up with that, really, and in terms of sort of mindsets in the game anyway. And I think, I just really appreciate you sharing that with us, really, because I think that's that's really sort of challenged me on a lot of things.
I hope it's what you're looking for today, anyway.
We'll sort of go from there. So the next thing I was going to ask you, Stuart, was just in terms of the vast experience you've got as a coach. What would you say is maybe the least rewarding part of coaching, and obviously the most rewarding part? I know you've probably seen so much, but if you had to really sort of nail it down to one aspect that you probably find the most rewarding about coaching, and conversely, sort of maybe the least thing you enjoy about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the worst thing you ever have to do is break somebody's hearts and beliefs and dreams.
Mm.
And you have to do it. But if your expectations are set out in place at the start of an academy, parents and kids and that, sort of come to terms with it much quicker than. But it's never a nice thing to do, is to let someone go.
No, I was going to ask you about that, only from my personal experience, because I was released from two, in my last year of high school, I was released from two professional clubs. And one was fantastic, it sat me down, spoke to me face to face, and spoke about ways I can develop and et cetera, et cetera. I won't bore you with details. But another club that I went to then after that, it was pretty much done by a letter, more or less. And it's just that sort of heartless approach. And although obviously it was horrible, but I suppose for you, from yours, because you were the other side, you've been, the other side of those conversations. How do you do it? What goes through your head? Do you have to just try and be emotionless, or do you have to? For me, I found it better that someone was the man, the coach who sort of released me, someone I've built a bit of rapport with over the sort of previous 2 years. So I appreciate the fact that he felt, even if he didn't, he gave me the impression he was gutted that I was going, almost, even though it was him who chose to do that, if that makes sense. So I don't know what your sort of approach to that is, really.
I think that's key, Charlie, is having a relationship with people. It's the key to all. If you think about Ericsson's 3-stage model, romance, sampling, and integration, I'm a big one for romance, mate. And I don't mean kissy, touchy, feely. I'm talking about, having the opportunity to develop some affection for the organisation, some affection for the match. Because without affection, you're not going to get commitment. And so, I don't think I've had a player that I've not had a decent relationship with in the hundreds of kids I've coached, and men and everything, really.
Yeah.
Take me time under the fabric of all of them. Because that's important, whether they're exiting or they're progressing on. And exactly like the coach that supported you through your transition, you appreciate the fact that it took time to get to know you.
Yeah.
You're connected to your dreams and aspirations. And, kids can go for different reasons, can't they? I mean, they might not match the playing style and model of club. They might have been there for a different reason, but they've not actually cut what they want. They might make it somewhere else. So the second part is having a sensible exit strategy for them. And whether that's a successful exit to the group above, so they transition into the first team squad or wherever, that needs to be done properly and professionally and delicately as well. Because it could easily move up a level and make enemies very quickly of coaches. It needs to be done sensibly as well as when moving on to another club that you've actually put a little bit of work in, and you've turned around and you've found, right, I've got your 3 options here. Which one do you fancy? You're not for us, but I think you might be suitable for somebody else.
Yeah.
Charlie, I've experienced that. Like when I went to Australia, nobody wanted me. But they found me somewhere to be and give me a leg up. And I just think that If I don't do that for every player that's been through my hands,
Yeah.
I shouldn't be doing it. I shouldn't be doing the job.
Yeah.
So whether they're moving up or whether they're moving off, I think you need a relationship with them. You need to understand what their network looks like as well, how bright the parents are and how well they can understand it. And they need an exit strategy in terms of some options that are available for them. That's the ugly part. Even though you do a job and and it's got to be done. I think no matter how well you do that, it isn't the pleasant side of how we coach. Even leaving people out that are so committed is always a horrible thing.
Yeah, I think, Stuart, just to sort of say really that I think that not that it was an excuse as to why I never made a career after being sort of released in schoolboy sort of forms, but having the first release was fine, and I sort of still felt I was okay to then go to another pro club and trial there, and then got in, and then got released again. But because the second time it was done by a letter at sort of the end of when they were handing out the apprenticeships, I completely fell out of love with the game. And I'm not saying that my career would have gone a different trajectory, because deep down I think I probably am aware that I was not good enough to make it in the professional game, but I probably could have made it in different. I ended up just playing low end of semi-pro football, and I probably could have gone higher. And the only reason, I'm not saying it's an egotistical way, but I think it was that legacy of the way that that second coach sort of system dealt with me, and it just completely disenchanted me from the game really. And then that I didn't realise that until now. I'm only 31, but I've ruptured 2 ligaments in my knee, so I can't sort of play anymore to sort of any decent level, if that makes sense. But so for me, the legacy of that release from a coach in one split second pretty much sent my sporting career, for want of a better phrase, on a completely different trajectory. And I think, like you say, it's so powerful as a coach, not just what happens on the field, is it? It's that that sort of exit strategy and stuff is incredible.
I think you've been really treated unfairly there.
Yeah, but it's not an excuse. But
I mean, when we do short-term walk-in programs, say we're looking at a new talent pool, Charlie, on a short-term walk-in programs where people can just go walk through the door and have a look at and spend maybe 2 or 3 weeks on a short-term program, and people are trying to talent ID. I think at the start that you say, right, there's that many years turned up here, guys. We'll go through a selection process.
Yeah.
Your expectations talk, and you say this is what I look for, and we're going to make a decision in 3 weeks' time. But all we'll do, guys, is write you a letter. You'll receive a letter saying you're in, and you'll receive a letter receiving you're out. And let's make it clear from now, we're not going to put in run better, lift. You need to be bigger. You need to be faster. You need to be faster.
No, of course.
That's not happening. You're either in or you're not. All right. So if you're not happy, before we start, there's the door. Just give them. I've no problem with a cut off like that if the expectation's been done on a short-term program. But someone like yourself that's been through and showed some commitment and resilience and adherence to what's been presented in front of them, to receive a letter is a cop out.
Yeah. It wasn't. I'm not saying sharing this to sort of be all woe is me, because ultimately, as much as it was that, it's still that mental strength to go through that. But I just think that it made me realise as a coach now how important what you say to particularly youth players, but any sort of player is, and the impact that has really.
I always view it like through the CEO's eyes, me. So if I was a chief executive of the club where you were at, you felt like that about my club, and one of my coaches had done that to you, and I'm paying money to him to do a better job than that. I just don't really have it.
No, that's true.
You've got some bounce back ability. It took a little bit of time and a little bit of a hiccup, but you got going again.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's transferred to your workforce skills and your attitude. Now you're developing yourself and the people that you're teaching, Charlie.
Yeah. So, I appreciate that. No, but I think it was just, I wasn't saying that to sort of after sympathy, but it's just more that it's only when you look back, you realise how important our sort of role is as coaches, not just on the sporting, on the sort of field, really, in that sense.
I remember one kid who I really, really liked, and he was on a long-term programme, and his parents and everybody were fully committed. He was a wonderful sportsman, all-round sportsman, and he's a very, very, very good local soccer player now. And he was playing rugby, and he come on a short-term programme, but he was tiny, and I could have signed him. And I thought about signing him, and because I thought to myself, I've done this before with tiny kids, and they've got through. But was it a big commitment for him to make when it just might the he didn't have that really potential to be able to go all the way, if you like. So, cut a long story short, I remember driving about 2.5 hours to his house. He's the only one I did it for.
Right.
Yeah. And it's just because I've never met a kid that was more committed and contributed so much to the pathway. All right. Went round to tell him and give him the bad news. And it was horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. And so I think, I'm glad I did that because I can look him in the eye now, and I'm really proud when I see him and I see him doing him well, and I can look his parents in the eye. That I actually took time to go and do that. Other people it was a little bit easier, but someone who'd actually contributed to the pathway so much as a young player deserved that respect.
And I think, like you say, I suppose it's that short-term pain for you, as much as it must be, horrible to. I've fortunately never had to do it, but it must be horrible to have to be the purveyor of that news. But the long-term benefit to both you and the player, I suppose, has to outweigh the fact that it might make you feel a bit uncomfortable and make you feel a bit shit, sort of, while you're having to give the news, I suppose, doesn't it, in that sense?
Perhaps he was only 15 at the time. He was in his year 11 now, but I'm talking a long time ago. I'm talking about 15 years ago. We're good friends now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he asked me for advice on different things. So we've still got a relationship, I suppose, what I'm saying. And we're moving in completely different in places. And we keep in touch on social media. I think that's a win, Charlie. Everything that I've done, that's a win.
Yeah. Sorry, you broke up. Sorry, say that again, Stuart. Sorry, I just lost you for a second.
I think when I'm really pleased that we're still good friends.
Yes, yeah.
And that's a win.
Yeah, that's the legacy of it, isn't it?
That's still a win.
No, I think that's. I mean, this might even answer the next question, which was, what's the most rewarding part? And maybe it is those relationships that you've built up, like you say. But obviously, through your vast experience, what would you say, conversely, from what we've just said about having to do that sort of negative stuff? What's the most rewarding part of coaching?
Just watching them kick on. I've won loads of stuff. Won and lost games at Wembley. Won all that, and I've won and lost international matches in front of thousands of people. But yeah, just watching your players kick on and become good parents to the children and become good people, and the big whip you had as to crack when they were kids, it's about being good people and being at your hardest hit. You can actually see he's been transferred to their workforce skills in their life and things like that. And I'm not saying I'm not trying to come across like I'm the be all and end all in the church or anything else like that. It's just that the fact you've contributed to that because they were so committed to. And as a coach, you had a big whip to crack at the time, and you're not into shit. And watching them achieve good things in life. So yeah,
that's an amazing legacy to have, I think, Stuart. To be fair,
that's it. I mean, it's nice to win at Wembley and places like that, and it's great to win in New Zealand in their own backyard. All lovely experiences, but it doesn't beat when you know that someone's that your supporter has is contributing to society, their coaching and their playing and stuff like that. It's lovely.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that's summed it up beautifully, and I think I really appreciate you being so honest and so frank about you and your sort of philosophy and stuff. I was just going to finish off, Stuart, with just some questions that us sort of, I don't want to say mere mortals, but people like there'll be lots of maybe people and coaches listening who haven't coached at the elite level where you have and things like that. So just a couple of questions about the background of that, really, and so I suppose the first one I want to kick off with is the most sort of pertinent one in terms of. You obviously worked at Leeds Rhinos, and I believe you were there when they were world champions, and obviously with Great Britain as well, world champions with these sort of academies and stuff. My question to you really is, where do you, when you've won like a world championship, I know this sounds silly, but if you're at the top and the sort of elite, as a coaching team, where do you sort of go from there, really? If you're like the number one, sort of, you're at the pinnacle, really, I suppose. Because for me, I know it sounds odd having never been in that position. Until you get to that point, you've always got that goal, haven't you? Of we're going to win this, we'll win the next game, win the next game. But when you actually get to that and you are the best in the world, where is it hard to sort of keep that mindset of? I don't know. I suppose it's just fascinating, really, for me to see what that's like.
You've got the right players, Charlie, in professional sport, and they're at the top of the food chain like that. They've got about some of the things we've talked about today, that they've got a desire to improve and do things better. What they do in their day, needs to be smarter. Doesn't always need to be more. It might need new people putting in there, things like that. So players themselves are driven intrinsically to improve. Otherwise, they might not. That's the reason why they're not getting there. But that obsession to be better players is a key attribute for the people that are in your team. So that needs to be right. And again, you need to have that philosophical view that what made us successful today is now obsolete. Everybody else is going to be doing it, So, if you've got those little micro cultures right, that you've got that appetite to keep, doing things better. As a coach, you're probably going to develop a really good point in history of the club in time when you're there. It's never going to last forever, but your time as a coach, that you might turn that into, like Leeds Rhinos did, 14 trophies in 12 seasons. Then they've been through a catastrophe, and now they're coming through again. So it's about the management and everybody else that and even the CEOs will be looking at the coaching staff and seeing that they're on revolving doors as well. Who's the next best one coming through? And it really is about that synergy of all those things taking place. There's a huge effort to improve and do things better, not more, just smarter than what you've just done now. And having really good, I think it's really good, important that you've got like futurists kicking around, that what's the game going to look like in the future? Where could it shift to in 2 or 3 years' time? What's it going to look like over the next 2 years? And is it shifting? Because sport does. Look how much, your game of soccer's changed. Rugby League has massively. And then that becomes a lifeblood of everybody else, doesn't it?
That's true,
And it does look like that. What can you do better? But for your grassroots coaches, it is, and all you need to do is just soften it up a bit and start to think about, right, where can I go and access a coach that I can speak to and be mentored? Where can I access the information? What's the best book to read? Who's the world's best at developing 12-year-olds grassroots? What's written about it? What sport? And it might be hidden away in badminton or netball or somewhere. Having the foresight to go and find things like that and to contact people, and what's the best, just to contact somebody on Twitter and say to them what's the best book to read for the to someone who's got great developing young people. So I think that's what it looks like at that level. Charles. When it's filtered down a little bit, it's just having that drive to keep doing things, keep learning.
I think that's this is probably maybe where this sort of series that I'm trying to put together is slightly self-indulgent, like you say, of trying to get speak to people from different spheres of sport and not be too sort of too narrow-minded. So I think that can be something to fall into. So I suppose that's that makes sense then, what you were saying about what your mindset has to be once you've been successful. And I suppose the only go on, sorry, Stuart, go on.
You haven't got time now, but if you ever wanted to do it again, I'll tell you a story about how I met Yoda on the banks of the Danube.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it's a good story when I met Yoda on the banks of the Danube. My students love it. And and I wouldn't do it justice to squeeze it in, but this only happened to me last year. Yoda being a really famous water polo coach. I bumped into in Serbia that knocked me all over the place in terms of becoming. And I thought I'd seen it and everything, but what I discovered was excellent. The tasks he set me. So I'm doing it like a little segue, a little story that I'm going to do in between some of my chapters on my PhD. The day I met Yoda on the banks of the Danube.
That sounds like the name of a book as well. That's probably what your PhD should be called, shouldn't it? So it's
if it turns into anything, that'd be a good. It's a captivating story for coaches, at least, Charlie. Anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely, no. I think you bang on, and it's incredibly engaging, isn't it? I think it's. But yeah, I was going to ask you just one more question, but feel free. You don't need to sort of necessarily answer it. It was just more something I was fascinated, and if you don't want to, I wouldn't be offended. But it was just in terms of if you're at like a world tournament, in games obviously come quite thick and fast. How do you sort of prepare for that from a coaching perspective? And what I mean is in terms of obviously you need to allow for recovery, I assume, and particularly in your sport more so. But the sessions you then put on in that environment, because any coaching I've done has only been where I've been based in that club. I haven't done any tours or anything like that as such. So, how much of it then is about recovery? How much is it maybe just set pieces? What do you do in between games, if that makes sense, at that level when you're in that sort of environment?
Well, you've got to make sure that you've got a diverse squad, haven't you? So game one's not going to look like game two's not going to look like game one, is it? because
No.
like your research will be, will produce, because you've got, say, if you're looking at England in the World Cup or something like that, they'll do a tremendous amount of research on every team that's in their group, and they might have 4 or 5 different strategies that they're going to use within that. And yeah, the main principles of how they play won't change. So yeah, you've got a different approach to each one. So even before the competition started, there'll be some rehearsal on those strategy and changes that they might need to make. Okay, so you need to make sure that you've done some work beforehand. Okay, then the second thing you need to be able to do is what do you need to take with you in terms of people and recovery mechanisms. So like recovery is a multimodal approach. So have you got? Are you taking masseurs? Is the ice baths available? What they're doing in terms of supplements? So physiologically, there's a lot of things that need to be put in place to help somebody recover in time to play a game 4 days later or something. Normally happens. And then you've got and then you've got enough squad for injuries, and it comes down to it, is about sleep and the amount of what needs to be done. So if it's not major changes, you might be able to just have a look at some subtle things you can do in terms of footage and whiteboard and group meetings and what before you get outside. But then you might think to yourself, well, you'll speak to your sports scientists, but you don't always have them available. So you'll just make, you'll have some methods of monitoring in between those sessions yourself, like rate of perceived exertion and stuff like that. And you'll talk to the players how sore they are. Now, if they're still sore, and you've got physios and doctors kicking around, if they're still sore 72 hours afterwards, you've probably got a problem. Of like the amount of time you're going to get on the field with them. You might only get 20 minutes, so it might just be, Charlie, that you're going to get some tiny little things, and you've just got to prioritise on them. But always, remember they are, like the people I've worked with, the top of the food chain. So bring some smart things with them anyway. You know what I mean? They're not going to, you can't uncover every stone in the detail in that time, and you've got to have confidence on why you've picked them. That they're going to turn up with some good things themselves. You know what I mean? And they've got an appetite and enthusiasm to take on the next opposition and best again. Again, it's like such a dynamic process. It's as long as you've done your preparation right and you're managing those transitions between games really well. But it is a multimodal approach, and they are getting plenty of sleep and swim and recovery and food and things like that, and massage and everything that they need to keep them giddy. And then you don't know how they're going to react biologically as well, so you need some research. You need to get into that as well. It's like me. I'm really dopamine sensitive when I was a player, so I couldn't train 3 times a day. I had to without keeping myself subdued.
Right.
If I ripped in with all energy on my first session, I couldn't get up for my third.
No,
I just couldn't. So having an understanding of your players is important as well. That you don't want to get too giddy. Sometimes you might have, you might create a game that's going to create a lot of excitement. And in between actual events, you might not want to do that because it might take up emotionally as well. So sometimes it's about keeping them subdued as well. So they've got something left in the tank for the game.
That's I really appreciate you being so sort of honest about the insight of that, Stuart. Really, that's that really is fascinating. So I'll not keep you because I'm aware, obviously, it's a beautiful day, Stuart, and I don't want to take up your whole afternoon. But I honestly can't. This is one of the most fascinating conversations I've ever had, whether it's through his podcast or outside of it, really. So I just really appreciate you giving up your time. Just really quickly, if people wanted to sort of engage with you, whether it be through Twitter or, where are you sort of contactable? If that makes sense. I don't know whether you can put it in your show notes or something. I can't even remember what it's called. No, I'll put that. I'll put all of that on the on the sort of show notes and stuff like that.
If anybody wants to chat about coaching or anything else like that, and any help, and I'm more than happy to help them. through my Twitter. My Facebook's there. I don't do much with it, and
No.
the other stuff. I normally keep in touch with my kids on Facebook and things, and my LinkedIn's more for work, and I never really go on it. I shouldn't really. But
no.
Twitter's lively for our community, Charlie.
Yeah.
And because of my age, we never had this when I was young. So I think it's great that I can press a button and press a link, and it goes to a deeper conversation and deeper learning.
Yeah.
It works.
No, I couldn't agree more. To be honest, I think the like you say, that network that you spoke so sort of fondly of, and sorry, not fondly, how important that is. And actually, people bash social media, which, if used inappropriately, it is obviously, but it can be such an amazing tool for, like you say, for self-development through sort of conversation like this. So yeah, no, Stuart, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you giving up your time. So
pleasure, Charlie.